This is a demonstration video for BibleWorks. So I am here in BibleWorks. I'm going to search for my favorite Bible verse. It seems Isaiah 52:13, and you see there the various versions of this text. The RSV, in English, of course, the Greek version, which is very important, the Hebrew version, the original, two Latin versions, the New Vulgate and the Vulgate, which are the most literal Western translations, and I have a very literal Protestant Spanish translation, the 1909 Reina Valera, which is extremely literal. Sometimes it makes mistakes. It's so literal, like the King James, because it follows the Vulgate. So therefore, I will explain it this way. The English says, "Behold, my servant shall prosper. He shall be exalted and lifted up and shall be very high." It's the beginning of the famous fourth song of the suffering servant. The translation "prosper" is not very good. It is one of the meanings of this Hebrew verb sakal, which can mean to be prudent, and that's really more like the meaning to have insight. I think is the best meaning. The King James, which I could add as one of the versions, will follow the Vulgate here, and will have "my servant shall understand," which is a good translation. I would say "my servant shall have insight" is the best translation, because that will relate to other instances of the verb sakal, which appear in, for example, in Genesis 3:6. The woman liked the fruit of the tree, Eve liked the fruit in the Garden of Eden, because it was useful to give insight, not to make wise, as many of the translations say. Wise is a very, very important Hebrew word, but it's not there. So you shouldn't mix the verb hakam or hokmah, wisdom, with this other verb, which is used in other contexts, especially for the Messiah, I would like to point out. So my translation would be, "Behold, shall have insight, my servant shall have insight. He shall be exalted and lifted up and high very much or exceedingly." So a triple exaltation, I like to call it, of the servant in this introduction of the servant by the Lord, Yahweh. And I think this will correspond to St. Paul's, "Every knee on earth, in heaven, and below the earth shall extol the servant" in Philippians 2. There are other connections between the two poems. But the Greek version is very interesting. The Greek version says, "Behold, my child or servant." Pais is, as you can see, a boy, girl, child, or servant. So Pais is like son almost. In the book of wisdom, the Pais of the Lord and the Son of God are both righteous sufferers, just like this servant. But the interesting thing is that he shall have insight or understand. So that's a good, translation in Greek of the Hebrew. But instead of the triple exaltation, "he shall be exalted and lifted up and very high," the Greek reduces it to two things: "he shall be lifted up and glorified exceedingly." And that's interesting, because to be lifted up and glorified is exactly what the Gospel of John says of Jesus many times for glorify, and key times, some key times for lifted up. The Son of Man shall be lifted up like the serpent in the desert, like Moses lifted up the serpent in John 3:14. When you lift up the Son of Man, you will know that I am in John 8:28. And then the great pun, when I am lifted up from the earth, I will draw all men to myself. And that's a pun because they're lifted up in Aramaic, which he would have been speaking with a verb in Aramaic, not this verb in Greek, but in Aramaic, that verb, sakaf, means to both be lifted up or exalted and crucified. And that only works in Aramaic, and we find an instance of that use for crucify or impale in the book of Esther. And with that, I'm going to stop and see how this went.